Hello, welcome to our latest podcast. I'm Jordan Brown, Head of Consultancy here at Pennington Choices, and today I am joined by Jack.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm Jack Ashton, and I'm one of the Principal Consultants at Pennington Choices.
Thank you very much. As usual, today we're going to go through and have a look at a specific topic. We're going to have a look at Awaab's Law 6 months on. We're going to have a chat around what we're looking at, what we're seeing, what organisations are doing good practice, best practice, what people are doing to prepare for the next phase of Awaab's Law, etc. So that's what we're going to have a bit of a chat about today. Before I get into this, as usual, kind of have a look at our other podcasts. You can get them on kind of all your major channels, your Spotify's, etc. We're also on YouTube. As always, like and subscribe. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's have a conversation around it, Jack. So I suppose let's broadly just kick it off right from the start. What are you seeing? What are you seeing in the world of housing around Awaab's Law and how organisations are dealing with it or not dealing with it in some cases?
Yeah, so I think what organisations have had to do over the last couple of months is basically realign a lot of their service areas. So we've had the statutory requirements that have come in as part of phase one, and particularly around the likes of the planning, repair service, all that sort of thing as well, is that overarching requirement for dealing with the emergency hazards and also the significant hazards around damp and mould. And the statutory timescales now fully enforced as well. So what we're seeing across pretty much all of the industry is, the increase in hazard categorisation, making sure that the triaging processes are embedded within their organisation as well, and just a bit more of a reliance and control around surveyors going out and making sure they're meeting the statutory timescales for investigations, getting the summary reports completed and sent over to the tenants, and then making sure those properties are being made safe within the statutory timeframes as well.
I suppose in terms of that then, what are we seeing in terms of, so I suppose kind of from my experience working with organisations, it became quite clear right at the start of this that a lot of organisations were treating damp and mould in particular as a specialist topic, if you like, in terms of separate teams, separate kind of processes, procedures, and kind of setting up something to the side a little bit. Is that what we're seeing within clients at this moment in time? Is that how kind of most organisations are approaching it? Is anyone really embedding it within their repairs and maintenance service, or kind of is that kind of quite common at the moment to have it a bit separate?
Yeah, so it's still fundamentally part of the repairs service, but we have seen quite a lot of organisations making these dedicated teams now. So whether it's just named as, say, like a damp and mould case management team or a damp and mould team in general. And even though it's still forming part of the overarching repair service within those organisations, they are still, essentially functioning as part of the same entity as repairs, but they have, their own duties as part of that team to make sure the damp and mould is getting triaged properly and getting dealt with properly within the required timeframes as well.
So in terms of kind of how organisations are approaching this, are we seeing any really good practice or really bad practice at this moment in time?
Yeah, so I think it's essentially been driven from the top down. So we're seeing a lot of governance and redirection, a big culture change within organisations as well. Setting policy directives, making sure procedures and processes are embedded within the repairs service as well, and making sure that there's interdepartmental relationships across the likes of the contact centres within organisations, through to the planning function, also to the surveying function, and then naturally completing the repairs at the back end as well.
I think that's a key thing you've hit on through there as well. One of the things that kind of has been talked about a lot recently around damp and mould in particular, why I asked a question around specific teams and that as well. Then the things that I'm seeing in the sector is organisations that are treating this as a specific item of work that needs to be addressed are doing okay at the moment within the sector. I think when we start seeing release of phase 2 and phase 3 and the rest of the stuff coming in, there needs to be a shift. So the organisations that seem to be doing it better are the ones that are seeing this as not an asset problem, not a repairs problem, but an organisational shift in terms of how they deal and address customer concerns and issues, especially in particular around repairs as well. I suppose one of the fears that I've got for our housing clients is that if you've got a specialist damp and mould team, are you going to have a specialist excessive cold team? Are you going to have a specialist chip slips, falls, hazards, kind of specialist team, a fire hazards. Are you going to end up in a scenario where you've got 29 different hazards where you've got a specialist team for each? No is the short answer. So how do you now change that from it being a one team looks after these things into just day-to-day delivery and making sure we integrate different departments, different teams? Talked about policies and procedures there. This needs to be a whole organisational approach to how we deal with damp and mould in properties. And I think organisations that I am seeing that are better prepared, they might not be perfect in dealing with Awaab's law today, but are better prepared for the future, are the ones that are taking that approach and making sure that it's a fundamental shift in how they deliver a service rather than a problem here to fix as a one-off, if you like, for damp and mould stuff.
Yeah, and I think one of the fundamental things that organisations are shifting towards as well is that data-driven case management. So like what you've just been touching on then, Jordan, there's going to be a lot of hazards that get integrated as part of phases 2 and 3. They are, multi-team hazards. So if we're talking around, like electrical faults or gas faults or fire issues or structural issues, it's not necessarily just going to be boiling down to a common repair. But you're absolutely right. You're not going to have an individual team for the current 29 HHSRS hazards. A lot of these will be picked up by different teams within the organisation, and that all essentially fundamentally supports that multi-case management. So I don't know how organisations are going to have this set up, and every organisation is going to be a little bit different. But what we'll probably see across the industry is the process will be very similar. So a hazard will come in, whether it's through a stock condition survey, whether it's through a report from a tenant, or say a housing officer's been out on site, picked up an issue and reported it through. But the same thing of the way damp and mould is progressed at the moment, what we'll probably see is multi-hazard triage. So everything gets filtered through the likes of the contact centre, goes through to the planning function, and then what might be a little bit different going forward into phases 2 and 3 is you may have case managers. So you may have a responsible individual who will take that hazard and make sure that it gets dealt with within the statutory timeframes, even if it's not necessarily that team that's responsible for completing that hazard. It may be a compliance team or something like that if it's something to do with electrical, excess cold and heat, fire issues and so on.
I think that's the important bit, isn't it? I suppose it's not necessarily a case of who does it. There's many models, there's many systems, there's many ways to address repairs and maintenance, keep it as repairs and maintenance in general terms. But actually what we need to be able to do is integrate those other departments, and actually whether it is frontline repairs and maintenance, if that progresses to a compliance team, if it is electrical or gas or something like that, actually what you want is that from a customer point of view, not mattering. My timescales are met, my issue's been dealt with, I've been kept informed and communicated with, I know what's going on. And this is one of those things, we got asked a lot of questions pre-Awaab's law, I suppose, or pre-commencing, and one of the questions people talked around was kind of the challenges and problems that Awaab's law might bring to us. I've always sat quite firm on the fence with this. If you're a good organisation that had a good repairs and maintenance service, Awaab's law wasn't going to cause you too many problems. Because there isn't a fundamental shift in terms of what we're doing. The shift is the time frames. Obviously we have now got kind of some intricacies around the summary report and stuff like that as well within 3 working days. We've got things like if the customer requests a person to come down, you have to send somebody down, etc. So there's some nuances in there. But fundamentally we have got a customer with a problem, we triage it, and then we have got some time frames to adhere to in terms of delivering it, fixing it, making it safe, moving customers out, whatever they might be, which are all things that good organisations should have had anyway. So actually the organisations that are kind of landed really well are the ones that did well beforehand. One of the things I am seeing and coming up a little bit as well is kind of where there's no easy way to put this, but where people are treating things like Awaab's law as a tick box exercise. And what I mean by that is I want to adhere to those time frames, so I will send somebody out. Whether they are competent, capable, able to deliver that piece of work or not is in some respects irrelevant. I want to tick a box to say somebody's gone out there. And actually all that does is cause further pressure in the organisation, because you might have to go back again. You might have to go and do some further work. That problem isn't going away. The other side of it is that root cause analysis piece, which is organisations treating the symptoms, treating the mould element of damp and mould, and not doing that root cause analysis. What you end up in a scenario is where that comes back again, whether it's this year or next year, getting a bit warmer now, or next year that comes back round. That starts to add pressure to the team. Organisations that seem to be doing it well are the ones that are taking the time now to do that root cause analysis, fix those underlying problems so that Mrs. Jones doesn't come back again later on or next year with the same problems. And that's, I think, the difference between a good organisation and an organisation that's doing okay at the moment because they're trying to just meet. When the new phases come in, they're not going to be able to go down that tick list of things. I spoke to one the other day who used a word used a phrase around kind of looking at where we are as a sector at this moment in time. And the phrase that he was talking around was, it isn't an issue now around organisations acting. Most organisations are acting. The biggest problem at the moment is that unreliable assurance piece that's coming through. So what you've got now is the statistics look good, tick, tick, tick. We've had this many cases, we've dealt with this many, they've all met the timeframes, fantastic, but you've still got the customer, the resident at the end of this thing going, I have still got a problem. You have still not fixed the underlying cause of my issue. I am okay now, but we need to do something to make sure that it doesn't come back long term as well.
Yeah, and I think that boils back round to the organisations that are doing this well. So big focus at the moment. We touched on culture change a little bit earlier on.
Massive culture change.
It's absolutely huge, yeah. But the tenant journey, that's fundamental part of this. So having to go out on repeated occasions to complete a repair, not meeting appointments or not meeting timescales and all that sort of thing as well. The difference with new phases is the statutory timeframes now apply. So we touched on this a little bit earlier. These hazards didn't all happen overnight. Nope. They plagued our properties, ever since they've been built, particularly older properties with inherent design issues as well. But boiling back round to the tenant journey. So a lot of organisations are very keen to get this right, particularly from that first time fix perspective. Now, damp and mould is just one hazard, and damp and mould in theory is quite easy to address and deal with. There'll be bigger complications when we start getting into phases 2 and 3, particularly with those multi-hazard cases as well, where this has really got to be core and fundamental within the organisation of getting that right. And you're absolutely right. So one of the big issues that we're seeing across a lot of organisations at the moment is, the lack of expertise, the lack of surveying resource, trying to get people out of the properties to hit the timescales within the correct timeframes.
But I think that's where this is crucial now. So you talked about lack of resource and lack of expertise, etc. If you follow that through from reporting all the way through, what you end up in a scenario is where if you're misdiagnosing at the front end, it sets you back a little bit. So is your contact centre, whatever you're using to triage that first piece, do they have the relevant skills and expertise? Good organisations do. So we categorise these correctly. We might get a couple wrong. Fine, we learn from that and you move on. But if you categorise it wrong, if you don't get to that root cause analysis and that becomes a repeat case coming back again, those limited resources you've got become even more limited because they're dealing with things consistent or going back to the same properties over and over again. It's really, I do this on a training when I do HHRS training, when we do disrepair training, is if you go to a property, I'm a building surveyor, if you go to a property and I turned up my property and there was a huge crack in the side of the house, I am not a structural engineer. I would go and find a structural engineer to go, I think I know what the issue is, but I don't necessarily know what the solution is. Can you tell me? Yeah. We don't do that with damp and mould very much. Organisations will rock up at places and they'll do a bit of something. We'll treat the mould, we'll do a bit of this, we'll do a bit of that, and we'll keep an eye on it and see what happens, Mrs. Jones. That's great. That might come back again for next year, the year after. It might be 3, 4, 5 years of issues going on. That's a cost to the business, but fundamentally you've got a customer that's sat there going, what's going on? My health's being affected, my mental, my physical health's being affected. And this comes back to that point I made before, which is ensuring that we get to that root cause analysis. Not saying in every single case you need to send out kind of an RICS chartered surveyor, but when you do come across some of those cases that are a bit complex, don't keep trying to find a solution. Find somebody that can give you the answer to do that. And sorry, I apologize, I'm going to rant on a little bit now. Going back to a point before, because we're back to the customer a little bit here. One of the questions, I get a lot of questions every single week from organisations saying, Jordan, I've got this scenario, am I okay? Do I comply with Awaab's law? Have I got a problem? Do I need to do something else? And I always come back to the fundamentals, what Awaab's law is there for. It's there for the resident, the customer, the tenant. It's for the individual. So the very first question I tend to ask people is, where is the resident up to? Ignore your back office for a second. Does the resident know where you're up to? Do they know when you're going? Do they know what the fix is? Are they being kept informed of that piece of work that you're delivering it? Yes, great. You might have some issues with back office and how you collect data and how you record it. It is what it is. That needs to be fixed at some point, but fundamentally Awaab's law is there is that customers and residents are not left in their properties with hazards that may affect their health, mental or physical as part of that. So if you've got a scenario where you're worried around whether you're failing Awaab's law or not, take your mindset away from Awaab's law for 1 second and think about the resident, the customer in that property, and whether we have done the right thing by them. Because Awaab's law does have a number of caveats in there around kind of complex jobs and specialist contractors and stuff like that as well. If you're approaching these jobs with the mindset of how do I comply with Awaab's law for this one so nobody shouts at me or we don't get a disrepair case at the end of it, you're looking at it with the wrong lens. You need to be looking at it from a customer point of view. How do I make sure this customer remains safe? How do I make sure they are happy, they are not getting ill, etc.? And I think that's the heart of Awaab's law. It's a very cold kind of regulation, if you like, or legislation in terms of what we need to do, but it's for the customer, for the resident, it's not for you.
Yeah, and we see that across a lot of the new pieces of legislation over the last few years anyway. So we saw it with the changes to the Building Safety Act, we saw it in the likes of the Spotlight report that the Housing Ombudsman released before introducing Awaab's law. And you know, fundamentally a part of a lot of this regime change is making sure the customer is kept informed. And we see it through a lot of maladministration cases and things like that as well when they're coming through, where the customer's either been ignored, they've not been listened to properly, or they've just not been kept updated with repairs. And you touched on this quite a bit anyway. So there will be delays, there will be changes in appointments, there will be no access attempts and all that sort of thing as well. We're just dealing with these cases as and when they come through. And that's not going to stop just with phase 1. It's going to keep happening with the likes of phases 2 and 3 as we move forward into the next year or two. But categorically, a lot of this is framed around telling the customer what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. That's the whole point of the summary investigation reports. It's the whole point of following up. It's the whole point of having that triage process and the initial discussions when you're starting off with a case as well. It's keeping that customer updated and informed so you can get into that property and complete those necessary repairs. And this is where the industry does need to move away from a lot of this as well, where it's a case of if you've had a report, it's been ignored, nothing's happened for 6 months.
It's quite funny, I must admit, I've seen a number of performance reports, if you like, around Awaab's law recently. Some good, some bad, some kind of on the way there. Kind of, I'm not questioning the reports themselves. Everyone's making a real conscious effort to make sure they're recording the right information. One of the things that's really funny to me, though, every now and again I'll see someone that says 100% compliant.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit here right now with somebody who spent 20 odd years in repairs and maintenance. You can't have every one of these compliant in the sense of there will be complex issues. There will be jobs that actually don't adhere to Awaab's law or it's outside of it in the sense of the complexities and the specialisms need or the value of it kind of needs to sit outside of it. How you record that is really important because that 100% is not accurate. You will have a number of jobs that can't stay in Awaab's law's timeframes for very legitimate reasons. Now we have to wait for case law to understand kind of where that line is, but there might be some really, might be a road closure order. It might be the building safety regulator giving you approval for the gateways to do a piece of work. There's genuine absolute reasons why you can't adhere to those timeframes. So if you're reporting at 100%, as a leader, as an exec team, a board, a cabinet looking at that, I'd be asking questions, how have you got that to 100%? And if the individuals below you start saying, well, I've taken these 5 jobs out because that's bad. But you want to be able to have that visibility from a senior level to say, right, for the 90 cases that we could have hit Awaab's law, we did. Yeah. For the 10 cases that we couldn't hit Awaab's law, what are we doing with them? And again, it comes back to putting that customer in the centre again and going, was that customer informed, kept up to date? Did we just fob them off and just turn around and say, we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks when we get something back? Or did you have some engagement and a piece around it? Something, again, could talk to colleague, and it's really interesting. At phase 1 highlights the cracks. Phase 2 will widen the lens. And what it means by that is phase 1 is looking at, phase 1 was a test run in some respects. We're going to do it for a very emotive topic. We're going to do it for a very problematic area because of obviously the Awaab case and and what's come off the back of that as well. But actually that's just in some respects one repair. I know we use emergencies as well. This will essentially span to every single repair pretty much that an organisation will have a legal obligation to undertake. Yeah. That move from being a problem to an organisation, you mentioned culture before, cultural shift in how we deliver things, if you've treated that first phase, and again, good organisations haven't, as a problem to solve rather than an essential fundamental redesign of how we deliver services in this area, you are probably going to struggle when phase 2 comes out.
Yeah.
Phase 1, if you treated it in the right way and you're getting where you need to be, phase 2 should essentially just bolt on. It should just add in, following all the same process and procedures, and you should be in a scenario where your repair service fundamentally get. I know of a number of organisations that have already started to introduce the hazards of phase 2 now, because they're trying to see, if I add those extra bits in, where do I fail? Where do I fall over? Again, bit of advice for people obviously listening and looking at this is, we don't know when phase 2 is coming out. If you go online and have a look, there's no official guidance of when it is. There is an assumption in the sector that it'll be about October again, which absolutely, I probably can absolutely see that. I don't expect it to be tomorrow, next week. I would expect it to be around that time in the year. Yeah. But if you're waiting for go live of phase 2, you're probably not in a good position. Yeah. You need to be acting earlier than that to prepare and be ready for delivering those additional issues, resources that you may need to fix these problems.
Yeah, and we saw it a lot with phase 1 as well. There was a lot of early adoption with organisations that were keen to do something about this and just to align their processes as well. And big part of that was stress testing the service. So where are our weak points? Where are our gaps? Where can we improve and get a little bit better at dealing with Awaab's law as and when it comes through. So there's same rules apply for phases 2 and 3. We don't know the full time frame yet. We know there was changes between, say, last year, between the initial guidance that was released by the government in July, and then there's some regulatory timeframes that were just tweaked and changed as the law was introduced in October. And there's the potential of that happening with phases 2 and 3 as well going forward. But what we do know is we know what hazards they're going to apply to. The government has very clearly set out that phases 2 is going to introduce the likes of structural issues, fire, electrical, excess cold and heat. All them hazards are going to be introduced in the next phase, and then with phases 3, that's going to expand to all the additional hazards apart from overcrowding at the end as well. And then naturally we've got changes coming through for the Decent Home Standard too as well going forward. But I think fundamentally what organisations are essentially preparing for with phases 2 and 3, who are doing this well at the moment, is embedding these things within their service. So there's consideration for the likes of whether our data management system is up to scratch. How do we gather and receive assurance? You touched on this a little bit earlier around, we're reporting 100% compliance week in, week out, and categorically that's maybe true, probably not. But you're not getting the right assurance. If I was governance, if I was part of a board, leadership team, I'd want to know where the faults are and where the cracks are. And one of the things that I tend to mention to a lot of organisations is make sure your reporting's right and it's all data driven. You are getting that correct level of assurance because you want to understand whether that's a process issue or it's outside of your control. So fundamentally, when you are reporting against this and when you're collating that data, if you are going over time for completing a summary investigation report for argument's sake, or visiting, or you weren't able to make that property safe with a significant hazard within that 5-day period, you want to boil it down to understand the reasons and the nuances why. So if the reason is, well, the tenant didn't let us in, we went through our no access process, we tried 3 times, we've got all that documented evidence, I'd argue the fact that that's reasonably practical. You've tried everything that you can physically do to gain access to that property, and it's all documented as part of your auditable trail. What you want to find out on the flip side of all of that is whether it's a process issue. So our surveyor didn't turn up when we got his appointment. We had to rearrange it, and that was 2 weeks later. That's a process issue. That could be a capacity issue, a resource issue. That's something from a leadership team or a governance team that you need to delve into and drill into, particularly if you're getting repeat cases over and over again in those instances as well.
Absolutely. Do you know what? The learning culture is a really good one. Again, going back to that good practice. And again, I raised this on the disrepair course that we do as well. One of the questions I always ask kind of organisation individuals on that one is, do you learn from your disrepair cases? Do you learn from your failure? Fundamentally, if we miss the timescale for Awaab's law, what that will mean is that we are subject potentially to a civil claim, a disrepair claim from the residents for failing those timescales. So when I talk to organisations around their disrepairs in particular, one of the questions I talk about is, do you learn from it? And I don't mean do you learn from the repairs and stuff like that, but why was it a disrepair case? Why did it become one? What time frame did you miss? If you're paying out somebody at some point in time, then you have failed somewhere. Process, training, procedure, culture. It could be a variety of things, but if you know what it is, you can go back and fix it. You can retrain, fix your system, fix your process, re-educate. Whatever it might be, you can do that. That's why those failures by some degree are really important. So again, going back to the conversation we just had, if a leadership team you are seeing 100%, I'd be a bit nervous about that. I want to see the stuff that either didn't fit into Awaab's law or failed Awaab's law, and I want to see what we did and why we did it, and does that. I used to work with a guy who used to do process mapping stuff, and he used to always call it the happy path. The happy path is great, fantastic. The happy path works. What I need to understand is the unhappy path. So if this doesn't fall into here and it goes off here somewhere, what happens to it? Does it fall off the edge of a cliff? Do we pick it up? Do we do it right? Are we doing it right and picking up and doing the right thing because the personality of the individual finding it, or because of the systems, the framework, the processes that we've put in place that means if it goes this way, we know how to get it back, or we know how to deal with it? And again, that's what good. If you're sitting there as an organisation that hasn't got some of this stuff, hasn't even thought about doing some of this stuff, then phase 2 is going to become a massive problem for you when that starts to roll out.
Absolutely, yeah. And we are seeing some organisations just getting on the front foot of all of that at the moment as well. So, based on organisations having a lot of stock condition data and making sure that's up to date, you already have a categorisation of the types of hazards that are getting picked up within your stock as well. So it all comes back round to that preparedness, and we talked about a lot of this 12 months ago when we saw the introduction of phases 1, and a lot of organisations were getting prepared for that phase. But fundamentally, most organisations should be in a position now where nothing should really be a surprise to them or catch them out. You should have, ideally, like a good catalogue of your stock condition data, any HHSRS hazards. We're seeing a lot of organisations doing those assessments as part of their stock condition programmes as well. So undertaking those assessments are already giving you a full categorisation of what Category 1, Category 2 hazards are getting picked up within your stock. So as long as you're dealing with those processes as well, the only thing that's really going to catch you out going into later years is how do we deal with these in an appropriate way and in a timely way, and how do we keep the tenants informed as we're working through those stages as well?
I think probably a good place to summarise on some of this stuff as well, which is going back to the thing we said at the start, which is this is not a repairs and maintenance asset issue on its own. No. It's an organisational, cultural approach to how we deal with residents in their properties. Your repairs and maintenance is one strand to that, which is something is broken or failed, or something's not working so the customer's told you, or you found it, great. How do you deal with it from different approaches? When you're doing your compliance inspection, we do a lot of compliance stuff, gas engineers, electrical engineers, have they got good understanding and education to be able to identify these issues early so they can tell you about it and do something with it? You've got housing officers, income officers, ASB officers, caretakers, scheme managers, you've got lots of eyes and ears on the ground. Do they know what they should be looking for and spotting out for? Do they understand the implications of not telling you? And I don't want to get into the world of disrepair and kind of implied knowledge and stuff like that as well. But as an organisation, you have these risks out there that you need to know about as quickly as possible, because the Awaab's Law timeframe kicks in the moment one of those employed individuals or subcontract individuals finds out about this issue. Have you got the right processes to drive it in? Yeah. Stock condition. One of the biggest drivers that comes from the regulator in particular is understanding your properties. A lot of organisations put a lot of hope on stock condition data, which is absolutely what they should be doing. Stock condition should capture that information. We're looking at, talks about HHS assessments there. That's the time we do, and part of Decent Home Standard is we'll do a HHS assessment at that time for that condition of that property. It's really, really important to us. But does that data feed in anywhere? Does your investment programme take things not just from stock condition, but HHS, repairs and maintenance, local knowledge, legislative changes that are coming over the hill? Has your investment programme got that involvement in there? Because you'll end up in a similar scenario. As you start to fail customers, you will get more claims against you. As you get more claims, you've got less resource. As you've got less resource, you will fail more often. You fail more often, and this is a really vicious cycle that goes round at some point. So actually, you're in a position at this moment in time where there is a phased approach to Awaab's Law. If you are a bit behind and not capturing everything, not doing everything perfectly, that's reasonably okay. As long as you are, not when I say reasonably okay, I apologize, let me clarify that. Reasonably okay in the sense of you take 6 days to the 5 days because of a legitimate reason, but the customer is kept informed and up to date and stuff like that. That's fine. We learn to do it better and get better at doing that and making sure that kind of customers are not left vulnerable and not left in these scenarios. But it's a learning piece as well. We need to get better. We need to get better at doing it. And if all that's informing your investment program, you end up being proactive rather than reactive to this nature of thing. I can see problems and things coming over the hill. I'm going to do something about it now before it becomes a big problem.
And I think a lot of that's going to be data driven as well. So I think one of the fundamental issues that a lot of organisations are realising at the moment is trying to bolt this onto their existing housing management system, for argument's sake. We touched on stock condition data, as we were discussing then. And, it's not just about the repair service. How does stock condition data drive and fuel your investment priorities and your programs? So what we're seeing a lot of organisations doing at the moment is, how can we manage cases from end to end? So how can we document every single stage? Have we got a lot of different systems that we've got at the moment that don't really talk and integrate with each other? But fundamentally, what organisations should be moving to a space towards is, that one version of truth, that auditable trail of evidence, because it all ties into, if something goes wrong a little bit later down the line, can we investigate why we've got so many complaints? Can we investigate why we've got, these disrepair cases? Because we're getting bombarded with that sort of thing at the moment. But I think a lot of organisations, particularly going into the likes of phases 2 and 3, should be using this opportunity now to just do a little bit of inward looking, have a look at the different systems that they're using, and get an understanding on whether they are getting the right information and also sharing that information interdepartmentally within that organisation, just so it gives them the best fighting chance of making sure they can evidence, they can prove, and they can demonstrate assurance as well that they're doing all the right things. But you touched on some really good things there. That's why I'm dialing back a little bit, because one of the other things that you touched on as well was, as soon as an individual from your organisation goes into one of those properties, essentially you're on notice from that point. So you've been informed by one of your representatives within your organisation that there's a hazard within that property, and those statutory timescales start applying from that point as well. So all that's got to be filtered back in, all that's got to be churned back into the system, recorded on your systems, and then driving those cases forward to make sure they get completed within those timescales as well.
I'm conscious that me and you could talk about this for about 3 hours, and we have done kind of off camera. We have had these conversations for a long way. I think the key bits, just to kind of summarise for obviously the people that are listening for me, is that not being perfect today is okay. Kind of as long as we're learning and understanding kind of what we're doing. We need to make sure that kind of moving forward that this is not a one-off issue problem to solve. It's an integrated piece of work that kind of changes the culture and approach of how we deliver services. We've labelled this podcast kind of Awaab's Law 6 months on, and we've talked about stock condition, HHRS, compliance, investment. We have gone around the house about housing management and kind of cultural and executive. And I think this sets out that this is something that involves the entire organisation rather than one team, one department. Okay, let's leave it there because we'll be probably going for a long time and have a look at this through there. So Jack, thank you for joining me today for having this conversation. If anyone wants to talk to us even further about this, please give us a ring. We'll be happy to have a chat with you. We will bore you for as long as you want us to. But it's something I think we're really passionate about. We want to make sure organisations get right as well. So thank you again for listening to this today. As always, please check out our website, have a look at our blogs, and have a look at our webinars and stuff that we've done there in the past as well. We have a free webinar every single month, so please feel free to join up and sign up to that and have a look. And then, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. If you would like to speak to one of our in-house experts, please get in touch either via our website or across our social media pages. Pennington Choices, providing property surveying, consultancy and project management services to organisations nationwide. Our expertise, your solution.